Hey, you fine folk. A little while ago, Riot released a bio for their newest champion, a Zonaite named Zeri, in a somewhat unusual way. They released it before she got to PvE, which is when new champs usually have their bios released, and they took the bio down after a few hours. Does that mean it was an accident that the bio got out in the first place? Probably. Are we still gonna talk about it? You bet we will. So, to start, let's briefly summarize her bio. Zeri was born in Zaun, with all its hardships, and soon realized that she was also born with magical abilities, and could influence electricity with her emotions. When the Cambarons started digging for some new extremely powerful resource, the mining process caused many of the buildings in Zeri's neighborhood to collapse and threaten its residents. Zeri saved as many as she could, but with as little control of her power as she had, there were also many who fell in the catastrophe. Vowing to never let the Cambarons hurt her neighborhood again, Zeri started fighting against the Cambarons and sabotaging their mining operation. But against the Cambarons' near infinite resources, Zeri was unable to accomplish much. When Zeri returned to her neighborhood, she wasn't welcomed by disappointment, but by the support of her friends, families and other neighbors, ready to help her in her fight against the Cambarons. So, when we evaluate Zeri's story, we have to consider the unusual way her story was released. We just have her bio, she's still missing both the color story and her actual quotes in the game. Additionally, her bio might not even be final, since it might still change until the official release. Now, that being said, let's take a closer look at Zeri. First of all, I do think Zeri fills a somewhat unique spot in Zaun. Most characters in Zaun are edgy, tragic, or in some kind of way dark. Having a brighter character there immediately distinguishes her from the other characters in the region. I think it's also interesting to see that she has a rivalry with the Cambarons in particular, and, at least from what is presented in her bio, she seems somewhat indifferent to the Piltovans at the top, or at least doesn't hold a major grudge like many of the other Zaunite characters. Sure, we have other characters like Urgot and Warwick that are specifically hunting down the Cambarons, but Urgot does it to gain power over Zaun, while Warwick does it mostly out of beastly instincts. And well, there might be more to it that we might get to see in the next season of Arcane. However, we don't really have a Zaunite character that tries to take them down with good intentions, to make them pay for their crimes and protect people from their cruelty, and I think Zeri fills that space quite nicely. Furthermore, I also don't think we have a mage in Zaun yet, another case in which Zeri sets herself apart from other characters. The fact that her emotions influence her control over her powers is a somewhat common trope, especially among young mage characters, but I think it works extremely well with her superhero-esque personality, and it perfectly symbolizes the volatile nature of electricity. As a concept, there are a lot of things that are interesting and unique about Zeri, but I do think she also has some shortcomings, so let's also look at those. So, first of all, if we want to evaluate a new character for League's universe, I think it's a good idea to start with the question, what do they do for the universe? What does Zeri do for Zaun and, to a lesser extent, Piltover? Well, while Cambarons have appeared in a lot of stories and are a central part of Zaun's world building, they actually haven't been explored in detail too much. Having a character like Zeri that engages with them more directly might help us get a better insight into the Cambarons as the de facto leaders of Zaun. However, beyond that, it feels like Zeri doesn't have too many connections to the world around her, or to other champions. On her universe page, when it was still up, Echo was listed as one of the champions related to her, and I think that would help with that issue, but he hasn't been addressed in her story yet. Zeri working with the Firelights, for example, assuming that they are canon, would be a really good way to anchor her into Zaun. But again, other than that, she doesn't have too much going for her. What are her experiences with the inequalities of growing up in Zaun? What does she think of Piltover? Does she resent them, or maybe even dream of going there one day? These are questions that need to be addressed by her color story or her quotes, because you can't live in Zaun and not have thoughts on these matters. And that leads me to my next point. I mentioned Zeri has quite a few things that make her unique among Zaunite characters, but not all of them are universally good. For example, maybe there's a reason why Zaun doesn't have a happy-go-lucky character yet. It kind of goes against the spirit of the region. That can be a fun thing to explore if it is handled with nuance and care. For example, Zeri could be shown to struggle with the darker sides of Zaun, always close to losing hope, but manages to remain optimistic through her relationships to her friends and family. These relationships that seem so important to her really need to be fleshed out in the color story as well, because they can't serve as the primary motivation for her if they lack any depth. Beyond that, there's also the issue that she falls into the trope of being an optimistic, bright-eyed female character yet again, since we've seen quite a few of those in the recent Champion releases. However, I think there's a few things we need to talk about before we judge Zeri too harshly. You see, we also need to consider her possible future. Zeri's story mentions that the Chem Barons are digging below Zaun for a resource more powerful than Hextech. Combine that with the fact that Malphite's story claims that the Void has reached the underground below Zaun, the fact that Shimmer is widely believed to have some connection to the Void, and the Void event has been teased heavily over the past weeks, there's a really good chance Zeri might get a lot of attention this year. This might help make her more interesting, give her more depth, and help connect her to actual events in Zaun. Furthermore, the next champion is very likely to be a Chem Baron, and there's a chance that Zeri's color story might be teasing that future champion as a Chem Baron rival for her, just like Samira's did for Rel. This would be another point of connection to be explored for Zeri. All in all, while she might seem kinda bland at first sight, I think Zeri has a ton of potential. With all of these threats that could be explored, she has a lot going for her. However, there's also the risk that she may not be connected to all of these things after all, and if they leave her the way she is now, I highly doubt I'd be the only one disappointed.